Okay, so part three of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Here we are. Back to my podcast. I hope everybody enjoyed the first two episodes. I saw some people watch them. That's great. Hope you all enjoyed that. Continuing on with what we've been doing. I've been watching all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films for the first time. If you are tuning in here, and this is the first episode of the podcast, I had explained that as big of a horror fan as I am, I've just never seen these films for various reasons. So I'm seeing them with a very fresh perspective. And, again, as someone who is a humongous horror movie fan, a very interesting perspective. To view these for the first time, it really is. So, I had said that I want to do all of the three big ones. I wanted to do all of the movies of Elm Street, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. And, it's October 19th today. So clearly that's not going to happen. By Halloween, I don't think that's going to happen realistically. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to stop doing this. I think, why not? I think I should actually continue doing this. I actually really enjoy this. It's kind of fun for me to do, so why not? And as I've said before, I really watch horror movies all year round. It's not delegated to Halloween. This is just a great time for watching them. So I think I'm just going to continue this podcast, man. I've said this before with a lot of stuff. Even if just one person watches this, then that's pretty much enough for me to continue because that means at least one person is getting enjoyment out of this besides myself, which, as I said, I really am. I'm really enjoying this. So I'm just going to continue it, however long it takes. But I'm not going to stop there. After those three, there's plenty to do. There's the Hellraiser movies. There's, there's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then there's of course plenty of other classics like Psycho and all the other ones, the Poltergeist films, which I haven't actually seen. That's another one I know that's crazy. I have not seen Poltergeist. I know it's wild, right? But I just haven't seen Poltergeist in those films. So yeah, there's that, and then there's plenty of other great, probably lesser known horror films I haven't seen. So yeah. Anyways, with that out of the way, we're gonna do part three, which again is just called A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Now this one is frequently a fan favorite. It's often talked about as one of the best in the series. Some people often say it's their favorite in the series, and you might not agree with everything that I'm going to say in this one because I didn't love it amazingly, but I did really, really enjoy it. And I have less to say about this one than I did the other two because it starts to get a little bit into the comic route, although not too much. It's clear that they're capitalizing on Fred Krueger and they're going that comic route. But Wes Craven did co-write the screenplay for this one, so it definitely it's a little more cohesive compared to the wackiness of some of the other ones. But I still didn't I wasn't head over heels for it. So, and I think what I'm going to do, although I'm not sure, but I'm sure you'll see when I upload this, for this one, just because I didn't have as much to say about it, I think I'll combine this with the fourth one. And that doesn't mean that I felt the same about both of them, because the fourth one I liked quite a bit less than this one. But I think for sake of trying not to artificially extend this podcast, I will just combine these two films, and then the next one will probably be The Dream Master and Freddy's Dead. So we'll combine part 5 and 6 into one podcast. I think that's going to work. So with this one, this takes place a year after the last one, and we're dealing with Patricia Arquette. Again, remember, I didn't know anything about this, so I didn't expect to see her, but a young Patricia Arquette playing Kristen Parker, who's dealing with, the typical dream nonsense. She's getting chased by Freddy, and then when she wakes up, her mom catches her in the bathroom slicing her wrists. So she goes to the psychiatric hospital, and then we're dealing with this character who's one of the main characters, Dr. Gordon, who's her doctor. And you see her and you meet all of her friends basically that are in there. And again, you gotta deal with me. I'm really bad with names. I did just see this last week or something like that, but I'm terrible with names. There's Kincaid, who's And all these characters in this one, they all have like their sort of persona, so to speak, if that term makes sense, like who they see themselves in their dreams. We'll get to that, but we all know the plot. They all gain that power within their dreams. He's kind of like the boxer dude. There's the character who's in the wheelchair. There's the character who can't speak. There's the character who wants to be a TV star, and then there's like the rocker chick who I think was like a drug addict or something like that. So basically, they bring Nancy back, which is great, and Nancy is like an intern psychologist, I think, or a therapist, and we get to see her again, which is great. And I guess before I get too deep into it, they brought, like I said, Wes Craven back to write the screenplay. He didn't direct it. Chuck Russell directed it. But Wes Craven wrote the screenplay, and he co-wrote it. There's a bunch of other people that wrote it, but I know Frank Darabont co-wrote the screenplay for this one, which I thought was cool. I love Frank Darabont. If you guys don't know him, he directed Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, The Majestic, and The Mist. I think he probably wrote the screenplay on a couple of those too. Those are some of my favorite movies ever. I think The Mist is one of the best horror movies ever. It's one of the best adaptations of a Stephen King novel. But anyways, I'm pretty sure it was the intention to make this the finale, the final film, which we know, of course, isn't the case, because if this makes money, that's not going to happen. They're going to extend it on life support as much as they possibly can, but bringing Wes back is obviously a good idea, and I'm sure it was his intention totally to have this be the final film in this series. He, hey, you guys fucked up the second movie, in his opinion, bring me back and we'll try to wrap it up in a respectful and, in a good way, so to speak. So they bring Nancy back, which is great because it's always good to see her character. And now we see her in a different kind of light, I guess, because she's, a little bit older in this movie. She's like the intern psychologist or therapist, like I said. And this movie has a bigger cast than the previous ones, which at first I was kind of like, oh, interesting, they're trying to get a new spin on things. But then the more I watch this one, I'm like, oh, they really just wanted a larger cast of characters to kill off, because foolish me thinking like all these kids are going to band together. They're just fodder, basically, for Freddy to kill off. And so it's like, Patricia Arquette's character, Kristen, is kind of the main character in a way, at least at the beginning, and she kind of is throughout. But then when Nancy, they couldn't bring her back and not make her the main character, so she kind of is too. And a lot of this movie is, it reminds me in a lot of ways, almost like this is a quasi-remake of the first one, where it's not a total remake, but there's a lot of throwbacks in the sense that, you have a group of kids who are dealing with Freddy and their nightmares. They're all seeing the same thing. They're trying to tell the people that are caring for them, and no one is listening. Very similar to the first one. Characters are getting killed off. No one's really taking much notice of it. That kind of thing. And it's even harder for them, perhaps, in this movie, because they are institutionalized patients. So it's like easy for these characters to just say, oh, well, they're crazy, they killed themselves or whatever. It's even harder in a sense. Not that this movie goes like super deep into that kind of psychology or anything, because it's more of a fun movie. Like I said at the beginning, at least from my perspective, this started to push further into the horror comedy route. So I don't think this is to be taken super seriously. Not that the first one really was, but that one was definitely more serious. But it still did a pretty good job. So, what we learn in this movie is Kristen, sorry, I'm going to say Christian a lot. Kristen's able to pull people into her dreams. All right, that's like a thing that's brought in. And she pulls Nancy into her dream, and Nancy is like, oh, fuck. And it's a really cool sequence, because she brings her into the dream, and there's like this, now I'm sure it's famous, the Freddy snake, but when I saw this, I was like, holy shit, that's awesome. It's like the snake of Freddy's head with this long, elongated body that comes out of the wall, and it's got all the burn mark skin on it and everything. And she pulls Nancy in, and when Nancy sees that, I love Heather Langenkamp's reaction in this movie when she sees Freddy in that dream. like just like, oh no, not this again kind of thing, like pure terror, like oh fuck. But then at the same time, she immediately knows what to do. I mean, Heather had the the ability to work on the previous movie and kind of get it more of a sense for that. But I thought this was one of the best parts of the movie, even though it's kind of it's short, and it's supposed to be visceral and fun. But I just really was taken aback by Heather's very subtle kind of acting. I guess not so subtle, but just the way she saw Freddy and freaked out, like, oh my god, and then immediately kicked into gear like the badass that she was in the first movie, like, I know what I have to do, and then they pulled them out. So then she's on their side, which is good, right? We want more characters on their side, and that's kind of the trope that I talked about. And this happens in all horror movies, but specifically in the first one, where the kids just can't get anyone to listen to them, and you're frustrated. And it's supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be frustrated, but it always does, at least for me, help a little bit when you get an extra character on their side. And so now we have Nancy. So then we go through some stuff where we learn the characters and everything like that. Like, okay, I'm going to do a cardinal sin here, but just to help, explain things, I'm going to read off what the characters are on this little page, my little cheat sheet, as I always have, because like I said, I'm really bad with names. I'm going to, it's just how I am. We have Philip, who's the sleepwalker. Kincaid, who's the kind of tough guy kid who I had a lot of good lines. I really liked him. Jennifer, the television actress who burns herself with cigarette burns. You will see that a little bit in the movie. Will, who's in the wheelchair, who's the wizard kid. Taryn, who's the drug addict, who's kind of the rocker chick. And then Joey, who is the one that can't speak. He's gone through some sort of traumatic event and he can't talk. So anyways, so then we go through some stuff, and then we start to get Freddy coming in, and we get to one of the first kind of kills, right? One of the first good kills. And that is where Freddy gets into Philip's head, in his dream. Remember, Philip is the sleepwalker kid, and he pulls him out. And that was my cat yawning, if you couldn't hear that. And he brings him up to this sort of clock tower, and he throws him off to his death. But the way it's done is so cool. And he's trying to get the other character who can't speak, whose name I already forgot. Sorry, like I said, I'm terrible. Joey. To alert for help. Joey can't talk, though, so it's one of those things where we're like, you're so tense just wanting. He runs down the hall, but he can't really get them to understand what he's trying to say. And the way that Freddy pulls his character to his death is awesome. Really, just truly, like, fucking awesome. He pulls the veins out of his arms. Disgusting, right? Like, just these gooey, sinewy strands of muscle and vein. And pulls them out like marionette. That's what it's supposed to be, but pulls it out and he's guiding him towards it. And then when he brings him up to the clock tower, you see Freddy's like giant face superimposed like a marionette kind of laughing. Now, I thought that was kind of silly. I'm sure a lot of people were like, hell yeah, that's awesome. But that was where I was like, I could have done without that scene, personally. And that's like, I don't know. I guess, well, hell, why not? I'm going to go into a little rant here. Because, well, I really like this movie, like I said. And, all the ones I've seen so far, there's definitely little things here and there that I've enjoyed a lot. It was this movie where I started to really kind of realize, which I kind of had an inkling from the beginning, that I was going to like the theme and the feel of the first movie so much, and that it was so different than the others, that it was going to be really, really hard for me to fully enjoy these other ones because they were never going to have that same feel. We all know, and I've said it before, that the first movie has this very, very dark horror aspect to it. It's a very different feel because it was the first one. And the second one still has that too, but it's a little bit different. And this one goes a little more comedy, a little more 80s, I guess, if that makes sense. That 80s slasher feel, which is super fun. Don't get me wrong. But it's not even the same feel. And so it's like little things like that I'm like, this is really cool, but I could have done without that. That superimposed image of Freddy giving that creepy smile, which I do love. It's like you could have just shown him falling off of the clock tower with his veins out and implied that Freddy was, puppeteering him, so to speak. I would have kind of preferred that. I'm sure that a lot of people would probably disagree with me on that because they love when Freddy's a sadistic bastard. But that's just my thoughts. And that's a lot of the qualms I had with this movie, which I know is sacrilegious, but whatever. I got to say my mind. It's just like a little too much for me. But anyways, you don't get to see him fall to the ground and explode or anything, unfortunately. That would have been awesome, but I guess they weren't, we all know the MPAA, they probably would have like freaked out if they showed that. And I guess they didn't really need to. It was pretty visceral up until then. So then there's another kill where Jennifer, the aspiring actress, gets her head smashed into a television, which was the same sort of thing where it was like too goofy for me to fully enjoy it, but I can't lie and be like, that was stupid. No, it was awesome. She's sitting in like the common room smoking a cigarette. She burns her arm with the cigarette. And then, she presumably falls asleep and she gets lured towards the television, and Freddy kind of like, his head comes out of the top of the television and he's got the two antenna on, and he says something along the lines of like, it's prime, here's your, I'm going to butcher the line. I know it's a famous line, but like, prime time, bitch. And he pulls her in and smashes her fucking head into the television. It's another thing where I was like, okay, that was fucking awesome, but also Freddy it reminded me of the scene, honestly, in the first one where he pushes his head against the wall with that kind of sheet effect they used, where his head comes out like in silicone almost of the top of the TV. Super goofy. The line was super goofy and funny, but it was still awesome to see him smash this girl's head into the TV. And Dick Cavett and Zsa Zsa Gabor were on the TV when she's watching it, and that's how she realizes she's fallen asleep, because like Freddy becomes the host and kills Zsa Zsa Gabor, which is funny. And my friend actually mentioned when we were watching this, he's like, do you think that the director like picked the person he hates the most and then had them killed? I'm like, yeah, most likely. I can't say that I ever expected to see Zsa Zsa Gabor stabbed to death in a film, but I guess here you go. Here it is, right? So that was another kill. I can't say I disliked it, but So in the next session, the next group session that they have, Nancy explains to them all that they're basically the last kids of the parents who had killed Freddy Krueger. So presumably that is why he is coming after them, because he's trying to kill all these people off. And at a certain point in the movie, I think it actually happens before this, Nancy ends up going to like lunch with Dr. Gordon, and she's explaining how she's been taking a drug. I'm going to look it up because I don't want to get it wrong. A Hypnosil, that's what I thought it was. And Hypnosil, which if you've seen Freddy vs. Jason, that they use that a lot in that movie, which is basically the drug that suppresses dreams. I think she says she's been taking that, and she's really pushing him to have him take that or give that to his patients, which will suppress their dreams. So basically they can sleep and not have to fear about Freddy killing them. And, he's weary on it at this point in the movie because he's still not like, they're just crazy, blah, blah, blah. So he doesn't really think it's necessary or anything like that. But she's really pushing for it, which also I was like, I totally forgot about that drug because I hadn't seen Freddy vs. Jason. I haven't seen it in years, and I remembered that they like really heavily used that drug in that. And I always liked that idea of like this tool. Maybe it's like on the nose and like a huge MacGuffin sort of thing, but I always liked that idea that they had this like little trick, this power they could use, like, haha, Freddy, we got something. Not that I would fucking trust that ever. If this was really happening to me and they said, hey, we have a drug that'll knock your dreams out so that he won't get you, I don't know if I could. I don't know. I mean, I guess I would have to try it, but I'm like, no way. That's not going to fucking work. He's still going to get me. That's the kind of feeling that I always had about this. So they have this like big group hypnosis session where they're all trying to see if they can like share their dreams together and get their dream power, so to speak, which is like the big thing of this, right? The Dream Warriors. That's why it's called that. And there's like this cool sequence where like I think it's the rocker chick does like a bunch of backflips or something. No, it's not that. It's Kristen who does a shitload of backflips or something, and like this obvious body double does these backflips and they're all clapping and everything. And then we get a scene which I kind of thought was fucking disgusting, where Joey wanders off and he sees this sexy nurse in the hallway, right? Who kind of lures him in to one of the rooms. And, he's like, hey, man. She's like, come in here, man. And it's so, you're like, okay, I know it's going to happen here, obviously. You know it's bad fucking news, but you can't help but watch these kind of things where something terrible is going to happen. And she brings him in, and remember, this is the kid that can't talk, and she's kind of like, it's so goofy and over the top, like, oh, you can't say anything or else I'll get in trouble. And she takes her shirt off, and we get like to see her tits and everything, which, I think this is the first point in this series where they've like showed a woman's breasts straight up, I think. Which honestly, up until this point, it's like, because say what you will, but to like, let's call a spade a spade. That's a cliche of slasher movies, specifically 80s ones. It simply is. It's like a huge cliche. And I was surprised. I mean, again, correct me if I'm wrong. Up until this point, we didn't really see anything like that, which I don't care either way. It never really adds anything, but it's just part of the style. But I was just like, oh man, it has been a long time since it's been a while since we've seen something like that, or the first time rather. And as he starts like, getting into it with her, her back becomes all fucked up and scarred, and then it's Freddy. And then the bed opens up, and you look down, and you get this kind of dated effect, but still kind of cool of like hell. Like you see this big chasm down into hell. So yeah, that was kind of a cool fucking scene. And then because of that, obviously, Nancy and Neil are, they're fired, which is what we all expected was going to happen. That they were going to be like held responsible for this because they just can't fucking figure out what's going on here. So that's basically up until this point, right? And up until this point, and I'm pretty much enjoying the movie. And it's like I have interesting thoughts on this one because, like I said, I really liked it, but I didn't love it as much as the first, of course, because of that huge stylistic difference. But then, like, let's take it back to the second film, which you could argue is much less of a comedy than this one is. And this is certainly not full comedy Freddy at this point, but there's the goofy, dated 80s aspect to it. There's the slightly goofy effects in the kills, like the TV kill is super goofy. There's just a little bit of that, I think this one came out in 1987. So we're getting into the late 80s horror, which, it does, late 80s and early 80s horror has a very, very different style to it, in my opinion, I think. It's not that much of a difference in time, but I think that it's a very big difference in styles of films, specifically horror. So we're getting into a little bit of a different style here. So if I'm going back to the second film, which was 85, I think, so really 2 years earlier, but I had mentioned that I really did enjoy that movie despite the criticism it receives for a multitude of reasons. And it's like, do I like this one more or do I like the second one more? And I don't know. I don't think I have a good answer currently because the second movie tries to be a little more of a horror. It goes strong on the psychological route, which I had mentioned in my second episode. I really appreciated, and that was my favorite part of the movie. But it also went a very different route in bringing Freddy into the real world, which I didn't like. I did not like it. And, you can watch that one if you want to hear my thoughts on that. I had a lot to say about that. But in this one, despite the goofiness, they get back to the roots of that Freddy is, in your nightmares. And they don't play around with that in this movie that much, really. It's the same style as the first one where he gets you when you fall asleep. And that huge, huge impending sense of doom that you cannot fall asleep, which I love. And that's what makes this series iconic, is in full swing in this movie. So I think that's why I despite the goofiness, really enjoyed this. And of course, Wes Craven was involved in this, so we knew that was going to be the case. So I hope you like my thoughts so far. I know I'm not being as descriptive as I would probably hope, but I am, like I said, I'm really bad with remembering the nitty gritty details of things. I was thinking today, like, I do like that I'm doing these kind of off the cuff because it's, I might not be able to remember all the characters' names exactly in each individual scene in detail, but I like the fact that it, like I said, very off the cuff, very on the fly, and that I am just giving you my thoughts as I'm remembering them. As someone who is seeing this for the first time, I like the fact that I have this avenue to explain my thoughts to you as I just saw it. And I was thinking today that I would love to come back to these movies next year after I have seen them maybe a couple more times and everything like that, and see how my thoughts have changed about them after they've kind of stewed, so to speak. So anyways, I hope you're enjoying this. Give it a like if you are. It always helps me. Please comment. That's my favorite thing. Like I said, I love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think of this movie. Actually, it's likely we'll just do this first one for this episode, but we'll see. So I'm going to take a quick break, grab a drink or whatever you fancy, and we'll be right back at it. Thanks, guys. Okay, I'm back. Hope everybody's doing well, having a great day, enjoying the fall weather. Okay, so now we get into a scene that I wanted to talk about since I pretty much saw it, and that's where Dr. Gordon, Neil, I guess we can call him, he runs into a nun, Sister Mary Helena, and she says, Freddie was born from a woman who was locked in the room with a bunch of mental patients who raped her nonstop, and that the way that they need to kill him is by basically laying his bones to rest, by burying his bones, and that sets the goal for the movie, right? The exposition wise, that their new goal is that they need to find his bones and they need to bury them in order to finally put him to rest. And this scene I was kind of like, what the fuck? Because it felt so expository to me. Like it just was like, came kind of out of nowhere in the sense that they didn't really lead up to this, so to speak. It just kind of came out of left field, like, oh, that's what you need to do. I know that I'm like looking too much into it, and I've said that before with these movies. Like I always do this when I watch movies, regardless of what kind of movie it is. I always think I like think too much about them. I do obviously, as a horror fan, have an ability to let a lot of things slide to enjoy a film, but that doesn't mean that I don't think about everything. That's what I did in the second movie. And this was one of the scenes where I was just like, that feels so like Indiana Jones-ish to me. Like, really came out of nowhere. It was really like, I don't know if I have a great way to explain it. Almost cheesy in a sense. You just have to bury his bones. It's what you have to do. Okay, I guess we can do that. I guess that's what we have to do. All right. And it was making me think like we're already dealing with some sort of retcon things. Because remember, in the first movie, the ending involves Nancy's mom dying, Nancy and all her friends who are now back to life dying. So it's kind of like, okay, so they all died. But then Nancy's back in this movie. So Nancy, and we learned in the second movie, although actually, I'm not sure. We did learn in the second movie that Nancy's mother definitely died. So that was a nightmare at the end of the first film where Nancy's mom died. Helen, I think her name was. Or Marge, that was her name. Marge Thompson. And, it's like, okay, so Nancy survived because she's in this movie. She's kind of moved on. She still actually has the gray hair from that sleep clinic scene. I forgot to mention that. I thought that was a nice touch, kind of showing that she's still dealing with this to some degree. But it's like, that's a total retcon, and you just kind of have to let that slide. It's like, well, why did Nancy's mom die, but Nancy didn't die? I mean, all of her friends were back. Was that Nancy's mother's dream? I'm thinking too much into it, but if we do want to look at it like that, and we're not looking at it like, oh, well, they just retconned it because obviously they wanted to bring Heather Langenkamp back. That had to have been Nancy's mother's dream. I don't know. It's a lot to think about, I guess, and it doesn't all make sense, and it's not really supposed to, but that's the way I thought about it. And then in the second movie, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't necessarily say if Nancy lived or died. They just mentioned that she had lived in the house, and they found her diary where she was struggling with things. Of course, they did mention her mother died, so you do get that confirmation in that movie. But I don't think they ever mentioned for sure that Nancy died. So in this one, it's like, okay, I guess she didn't die then. Somehow she got out of that. Like I said, her mom must have dreamed that. And it's like the whole thing with that she kind of learns from her boyfriend, Glenn, I think is Johnny Depp's character's name, that you kind of need to pull him out of the dream in order to physically hurt him. That's why she goes all Home Alone on his ass in that movie. And in this one, I guess that's not the case. You need to bury his fucking bones. Okay. And at this point, I was kind of like, all right, that's fine. Whatever. This is a fun movie. But we're just going to get into that point. And again, this is the case with every goddamn horror franchise that has ever existed. Each movie, it's like, you got to kill him somehow. And it's like, he's just going to come back in the next one. So here I'm like, yeah, all right. Okay, bury his bones. Can't wait to see how he comes back to life in the next one, And it's I don't know, I'm kind of talking to a wall here because we all know this happens in every horror film. But it is a gripe of mine. Now, of course, I'm glad that there are all these movies for us to watch and have fun with. So I can't quite be that angry at it. I'm not angry, but that frustrated. But this is always a thing that I'm always like irks me a little bit. It's like, almost, why did you even bother killing him at the end of the movie if you're just going to bring him back? And I get it, because there needs to be some sort of grand exposition, sort of climactic ending sort of thing. And they didn't know for sure. And especially in this movie, I guess that is a good point, that this was intended to be the end of the series. And I'm sure Wes Craven was like, okay, none more after this, please. And of course, they made like 47 more of these films. So whatever. So anyways, and then we get into a bunch of shit. Okay, so her father comes back, right? John Saxon, who's playing Sheriff Thompson, or Sergeant Thompson or whatever, who I don't think, I couldn't quite get if he was in his sheriff outfit, so obviously he's still working on the police force, but she finds him in a bar, and they act like they haven't really talked in a while, so presumably like Nancy moved away and everything, and they reconcile slightly, ever so slightly. But I was totally not expecting to see him come back into this movie at all. But they brought him back. And then begins this sort of plot thing of him and the doctor attempting to find Freddy's bones to bury them in this very cartoonish sort of car graveyard sort of thing, like a junkyard, whatever you want to call that, an auto yard. So that's basically what goes on there. So they're doing all this, and you got kind of the split thing where the kids are going into the dream, and the other two are attempting to bury his bones. And then there's a scene that is so nuts and so dated, but also kind of cool at the same time, where Freddy realizes that they find his bones, so he comes back in this stop motion animation of his bones and kills the doctor. Or no, sorry. Who the fuck does he kill? Sorry, I'm like all over the place right here. No, sorry, he kills the doctor. I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry. And then he knocks the other guy out. This was crazy. This was like total cheese, stop motion. But I guess that all of these series have them at one point or the other. And I can't say I hated it. I'm kind of a sucker for stop motion animation sometimes, even if it looks bad. Like Evil Dead has some of the worst fucking stop motion you will ever see in your life. But they shot that movie on like $6 in a pack of gum. And it's just so cheesy, but but that movie has disgusting stop motion animation. It was really gross, but I kind of am a sucker for that, so I can't say I necessarily hated that. Anyways, then we get into this whole ass climactic dream sequence thing where we all sorts of things, like Freddy's in the paintings and he comes out and everything. And I okay, so like I know that people love this movie, but I just didn't really like this ending that much. I didn't care for it so much because it was just like, I don't know, it just seems too theatrical. Like they clearly have more money at this point in the movie. I think their budget was probably like quadrupled or quintupled or whatever, something like that. So they clearly have bigger set pieces. They have more special effects going on and things like that. But it's so it does in a sense continue the dreamlike quality of this film. And that we're getting more nightmarish sorts of things happening, like of course the snake at the beginning of the movie. But I'm like, it's too out in the front. I'm having a hard time describing this, so I'm sorry, but I'm really trying to wrap my thoughts around it. It just seems too out there for me. Again, comparing it to the first movie where everything was so stylistic and dark. And that's, again, as I've said, that's going to be my problem with some of these, is that I'm going to continually compare it to the first one, which I love the style of. Now, it's not necessarily fair, I'd say, because they're very good for what they are on their own, some of them. Just because it's a different style doesn't mean it's a bad movie. Not that this is a bad movie. I'm just saying, again, as someone who's watching this fresh, I cannot help but compare it to that first one. I think that they did a good job wrapping it up. I just didn't quite care for the style at the end, and it goes full force at the end. So Freddy, who, and the father, okay, I'm sorry, I'm missing shit like all over the place. The father dies, John Saxon's character gets killed, and then he comes into the dream trying to lure Nancy to him, but it's not him, it's Freddy. So, because he hasn't, so she stabs him with his glove and kills him. And here comes my cat. And at the same time, the doctor puts Freddy's bones into this grave that they dug and puts holy water on it and everything like that, and presumably kills Freddy. But Freddy kills Nancy at the same time. So, it's like, okay. And I'm like, I don't know if I actually saw that coming. I know a lot of us at this point would assume, of course, Nancy dies at the end of this one. But I didn't see that coming. I didn't know how many movies that Heather was going to be in. I was kind of hoping she'd be in all of them because I really like her character. And I really like Heather Langenkamp as an actress. But it makes sense. Again, as a finale to the series, it really does make sense to kill Nancy and then presumably kill Freddy. So then they have another funeral, which this is something I guess I didn't talk about that much. They don't actually do this as much as I'm thinking they do. But to me, I was kind of joking almost when I'm watching this. I'm like, Jesus, every time a character dies in this movie, they have a little funeral sequence. Are they going to do that for every character? And of course, they have one at the end. That's actually probably only like 3 times in the movie, but just something funny, I thought. So, and then John Saxon dies as well, of course, because they had to kill off these major characters. So at Nancy's funeral, which when I first started watching this, I was almost like, there's no way she's dead. But then I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I guess they did kill her. All right. Kind of bittersweet, right? But at least she did what she needed to do. So anyways, Dr. Gordon, Neil, I keep calling him Dr. Gordon, but they call him Neil in the movie. He sees the nun, Sister Mary Helena, and he kind of follows her, and then he finds a tombstone which says that she's Amanda Kruger, which is Freddy's mom. So that's the big bombshell twist they drop on you, is that it was really a ghost, and it was Freddy's mother that was telling him this. Now, people watching this for the first time back when this came out probably thought that was awesome. It is a cool twist. It's a cliched twist, but I can't say that I saw it coming. I should have. I've seen enough of these damn movies to I really should have seen it coming, but I didn't. I didn't see that coming. But my problem with this is that they go from that to the little, wraparound, the little ending scene so quickly, and then boom, the movie's over. That it's like I almost didn't have time to process it. You get to this little scene where, I didn't even talk about this either. That Kristen had this little dollhouse of the Elm Street house, from the Thompson house from the first movie, and that when Neil goes to sleep, the lights turn on. So like a little twist, like, oh shit, he's not actually dead, or what's going, or is it Nancy trying to speak to him, or what is that? Just a little twist ending. They always have these, right? And then boom, the movie's over. And it just happened so quick for my tastes that I like barely had time to process, like, oh shit, Nancy's dead, funeral. Oh, the nun was a ghost. Oh, it's like it happened so quickly. And after he finds out that the nun was Amanda Kruger, boom, it just cuts to the next scene. And I get it, like they're just trying to wrap it up, but to me I was almost like, wow, that really went quick. I didn't expect it to just boom fly like that. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe they could have taken a little bit longer with that, maybe like an extra 20 seconds or something, but that was it. And that's basically the movie, I guess. So yeah, I've been a little less descriptive of this one as I have the others, and I apologize for that again, but I like the movie, like I said. I know that we're getting to the part where it's going to start to stray from what I really liked about the first one. Like I said, I know I'm going to really enjoy aspects of probably all the films, as terrible as some of them get, I know. But I am having a hard time. Like, the first movie was just so supremely excellent for my tastes. It really checked the boxes for everything I like in a horror movie. And seeing that for the first time recently, after a lot of crap, really, in recent years, I was like, holy shit, this is good. I see why it's so iconic. And so having those differences doesn't work for me as much. But I totally understand why this one is so popular and considered one of the best, because it's got just the right balance. It's got a little bit of that Freddy humor that people really like, that I don't really care for at all. But it's still dark and scary, and it's got a great cast of characters and some cool sequences in it. So I get it. Now, obviously, this isn't the last one. We're going to get into the other ones, but, So, yeah, it was a good cast, too, and I thought I love Patricia Arquette. This has got to be one of her first films, I would imagine, right? I love her. I mean, she's one of my favorite actresses. She's an astonishing character actress. If you haven't seen some of the other stuff, like she's been in, she was in The Act, which she was phenomenal in that. She was in Escape from Dannemora, that TV show. She was phenomenal. I love Patricia Arquette. She was great in this movie. A little campy, but that's kind of the style too. But she was great. And Heather Langenkamp was awesome. I didn't even talk about fucking Robert Englund. I always do this. I always get to the end and I'm like, I guess I haven't talked about him. It's about the same. I mean, he's great. You couldn't imagine anyone else playing this character, really. He obviously is having a little bit more fun here because he gets to kind of say some cool quips and everything. But he still is creepy in this movie. He still has that really scary edge where, like, goofy things are happening sometimes, but you do not want to be trapped in a room with this guy. You know what I mean? I like that aspect. And I know that they did change the makeup a little bit for this one. It's a little bit different. And, of course, you do see him a lot more in the light compared to the last two. But I didn't really notice much of a difference to where it was like really notable. I know in some of the later ones, people that are really, really big fans of this series get real nitpicky with the makeup used and things like that. So I have seen a couple more of these. I'm going to have to really keep an eye out for that because I am fascinated by that kind of stuff too. So I'll have to get back to you guys on that one. I always save the music for last. Just because, I don't know, I just do. And that was something that I really wanted to talk about because it was one of my complaints with the last movie that the music was very different. Bigger budget, they went with an orchestra. Not that synth score that is very atmospheric that Charles Bernstein did for the first one. And I thought it was an excellent score. It was a far cry better than what we get these days. but it didn't have the same style and it didn't capture the mood. And in this one, they bring it back. Okay. Now I do think there is some orchestral sort of stuff in here, if my memory serves me correctly. But they brought the synthesizer stuff back, which I loved. Just adds to the creepy factor. And they brought the themes back. That Freddy motif and all those little things that I really loved in the first movie are back here, which immediately adds to the style of the film. And something I didn't realize until afterwards, one of my favorite composers ever did the music for this. I had no clue. Angelo Badalamenti. He is known for synthesizer-based scores. That's what he's really well known for. He's one of the greats at that. He does almost all of David Lynch's movies. He did Twin Peaks. He wrote all of the famous Twin Peaks stuff. He did the recent revival. Yeah, I love this man. I mean, his score to Mulholland Drive is I think one of the most atmospheric and dark and moody scores of all time. I love this dude. He is old now. I'm going to check how old he is. He's got to be like almost 90. He's 83. Okay, he's good. He's got some time left. Hopefully he can do... I really hope... I'm going off the rails here. David Lynch has not done a movie in years. He did do the Twin Peaks revival, but he said he was working on something, a new movie or something, but then because of COVID, he really had to pump the brakes, but I can't wait to see what him and Angelo do. But yeah, I love the music in this one. Great. So that was A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, or Part 3, as I think we all kind of colloquially call them. I enjoyed it. I really did. I had a lot of fun with this movie. It had good kills and special effects, good acting. The cast was really good, even though I didn't really talk about them that much, but I did like it. We're going to get... Next time, I'm going to leave this as one separate episode. We'll get into Part 4, which is The Dream Master. And that one was pretty interesting, to say the least. I definitely have a lot to say about that one for sure. I didn't really like it that much. I'm going to be honest with you. It was fucking off the walls bonkers. It was getting straight up into the horror comedy shit. But it did have some cool things about it that were totally redeeming. So I'm interested to talk about that stuff with you. So this was Part 3. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, leave a comment. Love to hear your thoughts. I hope you're enjoying this series. Like I said, I don't realistically think I will get to all of them. All of the series I wanted to do this Halloween, but I'm going to continue. So, if we go into November, that's just what's going to happen, and I'm going to continue doing this. I really enjoy it. Everybody, take care, stay safe, and stay scared. Peace out.